lighting okay? It seems a little dark.
You know what? I'd like to have you a little lighter, a little brighter.
Okay, I have a, I was, hold on, let me just see if this makes it better.
Hey, everybody. We're trying to get the lighting together. Ooh. And it's good to see you, everybody. We're going to be talking about these Chicago ice raids today. It happened right up the street from my home. Hey, Bernadette, how you doing? How are you doing? How are you doing? Yeah, unbelievable. Unbelievable. Hey, correctional officer for the lockdown. My love to your family. My love to yours, Bernadette. And we're going to talk about them. Talk about these raids because they were really over the top. They seized 4 American children, and um, some were even put out in the streets naked, zip tied. No one deserves to be treated that way. Nobody. So I look forward to speaking with you about that and what you think. And now people have gone back into their homes, and their homes are they've been trashed. So there is that. So I'm going to bring Attorney C.K. Hoffler in, and we're going to get this. I'm going to see who else is reaching out to me because, uh, okay, all right, I'm going to do that. And okay, so let me just do that. Thank you, girl. Hello, CK.
Is that better?
Oh, yes.
Okay. It's still not, I just adjusted some light in the hotel room, but I still,
Honey,
I have,
it is. See, if
it
you
is
open
better.
up the blinds, if you open up the drapes, it might give you a glare.
Right.
So I don't know.
I
You know.
closed the drapes because I thought that the drapes, you want me to open them up and see?
Yeah, let's try it. Let's try it. Just even if it's just a little. Yeah, I think that might be it.
Is that better?
No.
Seems like there's a light. Let me see if this, turn this light off.
You still need the other
No.
light.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
need the other
I
light.
think.
I think the drapes are causing,
Yeah,
um, maybe I should close the drapes.
I think
I
yeah,
have,
because we had it much better just before.
yeah, I do have a, this thing here, but I have to,
Well,
adjust
actually,
it.
now this is better. I can see you.
That's better. Okay.
Yeah. What I was,
Okay.
yeah. But always, I learned from Candace, God rest her soul, have light.
Yeah, let me see. I ran straight from the room. I have these
No, I appreciate it. Oh,
things that I can put up. Hold. Oh wait.
okay.
Low G. Hold on. Let me. It keeps on flipping back. Hold on. Let me go to the picture. Let me see if that makes a difference.
Well,
Integrated webcam.
actually, what you had was okay.
Okay, so this one might be better.
Oh, yes.
Got to turn it. I got it the wrong way. Hold on. Let me get it this way. Um, and let me move it. Move the camera. Um, I need to move this way. Is that better,
Oh,
Santita?
oh my gosh. Absolutely. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
I
Yes.
didn't have a chance to change, but
No, that's like great. I can
okay.
see you. And
Yeah.
what Bernadette said, praise God. Well, she's saying praise God to correctional officer for the lockdown. His granddaughter actually is recovering. She's marking the second anniversary of her recovery from leukemia. So I know you
Mm.
are just, may God bless you and your family. Yes, there you go. That's it.
All right. This is a
That's
little.
it. That's it.
And forgive me, and if the audience can see this, I forgive me. I ran from the airport. My flight was delayed because the weather is horrific.
No,
Ugh.
no, but I thank you, girl. I thank you for coming in here. But we're going to get right to it because we've actually been rolling.
Okay.
And we're going to come up in 4, 3, 2. Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Santita Jackson Show here on AM 950 Radio, the voice of progressive Minnesota. It is a joy to be with you today. There is so much to talk about. So much. We've got the government shut down. We're in the fourth day of it. By the time you hear this broadcast, it will be day number 5. Many of our federal workers are working without pay. Hopefully, they will be reimbursed. Hopefully, they will not be fired. And certainly we're praying for a righteous conclusion to this situation. We need our health care. And really, I'm going to be doing a show on this in the next day or so because we need a universal single payer system. Because really, what the Congress is trying to do is really restore the subsidies for healthcare, which really is a windfall for the insurance industry. We need to get them out of the way. There are enough systems in the world. Pardon my editorializing, but I've been thinking about this. Uh, the Veterans Administration, it works, although it has places where it can improve. The UK system works, but it should be improved. Canada works, but it should be improved. A lot of places all over the world have universal single payer systems that work, and we should study them, figure out where we can improve them, and make sure that everybody is in and nobody is out. And that's all there is to it. Nobody should feel a lump anywhere, male or female, and just say, well, I've got to live with it because I cannot afford to have it treated. That's not right. No one should have to live that way. No one. So think about that. We'll be talking about that in coming days. But let's talk about the Chicago ICE raids. The raids in Chicago from ICE. Indeed, now, because many Chicagoans have pushed back, uh, the National Guard, 300 of them, have been deployed into Chicago. Let's talk about what happened Tuesday night at 1 a.m. At least 4 American children were detained. People were put in zip ties and hauled out into the street. Some people were even brought out naked because it was the middle of the night. Children were separated from their parents. It was a really horrific scene. It's just 5 blocks from where I live, quite frankly. And we need to talk about that. Where are we going? What was this about? I've read a lot of articles about this, and indeed, now a lot of people who live in those areas are able to go back to their apartments. Attorney C.K. Hoffler, former president of the National Bar Association, the largest and oldest Black bar association in the world. You all have your work cut out for you because people need to have all of you on speed dial. And of course, you are a contributor on Court TV, chair of Rainbow Push. There's so much that you are doing. Um, we've got a lot to talk about, but I want to just give this to you, everybody, because now with the National Guard being here, it's beginning to be amped up. Our governor did not request the National Guard. And he's been very, very clear about that. And now, for those of you who thought this was for brown people only, you never should have felt that that was okay if you did. Well, now they scooped up Mexicans, Venezuelans, and Nigerians, Attorney C.K. Hoffler. Any of us could have been mistaken for any of those nationalities or ethnicities, really. Think about that. Think about it. This is from Time Magazine. So let me just give this to you. Military style ICE raid on Chicago apartment building shows escalation in Trump's crackdown. At around 1 a.m. on Tuesday morning, around 1 a.m. Tuesday morning, armed federal agents dropped down from Black Hawk helicopters onto the roof of a 5-story residential apartment building in South Shore. The agents worked their way through the building, kicking down doors, throwing flashbang grenades, rounding up adults, and screaming children alike, detaining them in zip ties, arresting dozens, according to witnesses and local reporting. The military-style raid was part of a widening immigration crackdown by the Trump administration in the country's third largest city. And different reports show you, everybody, there were people who were naked. Children were separated from their parents and they were left on the street. Now that people are able to return to the building, apartments which have been nice, granite fixtures in the kitchen and in the bathrooms have been destroyed. People cannot believe that this sweep, they were looking for a couple dozen people, but more than 100 people were rounded up. What was this really about? And is this a violation of our rights? 1 o'clock in the morning. Attorney C.K. Hoffler, welcome to the show. Of course, you are on WAOK every Tuesday at 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time.
11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. That's correct.
And so we encourage you to listen to that show, 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time on the iconic WAOK radio station. It's based in Atlanta, but you can hear it everywhere around the world. And throughout the week, you can see her on Court TV. When you hear about this raid, I mean, I think one of the things that was so stunning about it is that it happened right in the middle of the Black community.
Mm-hmm.
And many people were not expecting that. And you know, because you've been coming to our homes for years. This is my brother, former Congressman Jesse Jackson Jr. This is his neighborhood. It literally is like a block from his home.
Mm-hmm.
We have lived in somewhere between South Shore and the University of Chicago neighborhood all of our lives. And this is where this has happened. And it's really been unsettling. And quite frankly, it's been frightening. It's been frightening. So let me back this up. Um, when that happens to you in the middle of the night, what do, Attorney Hoffler? I can't imagine being roused from bed, although typically I'm up at that hour working, but I got you. Don't judge me. But if someone banged on my door, let alone knocked it down at 1 in the morning, I would absolutely be frightened to death. I'd be frightened to death. I would not know what to do. I wouldn't know what to do. So you tell me, um, how does one process this?
Well, one should not process this comfortably. One should feel, everyone in this country should feel very uncomfortable, very afraid, very anxious about what is happening. Because in a situation like this, where we have a state and local government that is opposing the wishes and the mandates of the federal government, there's a conflict. There's an inherent conflict that can't be resolved, I believe, in an amicable way anytime soon. So you've got the president who is sending these National Guard people who work for the National Guard to assist ICE, but you have ICE federal agents that are storming into people's homes. It's reminiscent, Santita, of another era that was very troubling for this country and actually very troubling for Europe, very troubling for the world. So we're seeing play back things that we felt that we had certainly overcome and that we certainly weren't going back to, and yet it's right here. So what should you do if this happens to you? And it's happening to a lot of people who are victims. They are not the appropriate target. So what I'm telling people is always have your passport, because a birth certificate, they would argue, can be forged, even though it's important to travel with your birth certificate. Have your passport by your bed, because this Santita could literally be anyone. That's the first thing. Secondly, just as we have our cameras where we are recording things that happen, that's the only way that people have a record of injustice and abuse. Now, if you are someone who is a target because of your criminal activity, and you are to be deported because you are not a documented U.S. citizen, you're involved in criminal activity, what I'm saying cannot really help you, because you are exactly the target for ICE. I'm not going to say legitimately, because I'm not sure that these are legitimate court orders. There are a lot of judges that are standing down and who are being penalized for it or arrested for it. So if they have an order to raid a particular house, whether legitimate, legal or not, they're going to do that particularly now, and they're going to use the National Guard as backup. If that happens to you, the first thing that you need to be in a position to do is to establish your citizenship. The best way of doing that, in my impression, is your passport. A birth certificate is also okay, but a passport, because what a passport does, it says U.S. citizen. If you look at your passport, it will say United States citizen. It might be easier, Santita, to forge a birth certificate, although that's very difficult. But it is exceedingly difficult to forge a passport. It does happen, but it's more difficult. So I think that if it happens to you, just real talk, be prepared to demonstrate your citizenship. Now, the one thing that we know that happens is there's havoc. There's havoc everywhere. When someone bangs on your door in the middle of the night, in the middle of the morning, there's havoc. And so the first thing that people want to do is they want to protect the children. So if your children do not have passports, have their documentation, because they wouldn't have a driver's license. And by the way, a driver's license doesn't necessarily establish citizenship, but a birth certificate for kids does. Or a lot of people can't afford to go to the passport office and go through that process and wait and talk to their congressman or their senator to try to help them through the process. A lot of people don't have those resources because it does cost money to get a passport. It does also cost money to get, Santita, these little passport
The little card.
identifications, the little cards.
Right.
It does. And I don't know if there are social services that are absorbing those costs. There should be, because people literally, there are a lot of people that don't have a driver's license. They are US citizens. They were born in the United States. They're in our neighborhoods, they're in Black neighborhoods and brown neighborhoods, and there's never been a question about their citizenship. But in today's environment, you really have to prove as much as you can that you are a citizen. A social security card, something that will illustrate, if you don't have a driver's license, that you are a US citizen. And I think that's the most important thing. Secondly, you're probably going to say, well, call the police. Well, you can call the police, but I don't know if the police are going to be able to help you. By the time the police come, you could be carted off by ICE. What you want to do is be in a position to call a lawyer. And I know a lot of people don't have the money for a lawyer. I know that in a lot of jurisdictions now, they have toll-free numbers where you can reach out to lawyers if you have been wrongfully detained, because you may only have the opportunity to make one call. But if you hear that bang on the door, know that it's either going to be ICE or it's going to be law enforcement. Now, again, if you are engaged in criminal activity and if you are an undocumented person in this country, what I'm saying probably is not going to apply to you. If you're involved in criminal activity in the United States, I can't help you, because that is exactly what they're saying. Those are the people that they're designed to get. So it's easier said, just don't be involved. This is not the time for anyone who's an undocumented citizen to be involved in criminal activity, because they are gunning for those people. And that is theoretically what ICE is supposed to be doing. But what it is doing is targeting and getting people who are not involved in criminal activity, who are not necessarily undocumented, or even if they are undocumented, they're not involved in criminal activity. And when you've got safe havens or cities that are protecting those individuals, that by definition, there's going to be a huge conflict. And that is what we're seeing in Chicago, Santita. That's exactly what we're seeing. We're seeing the mayor saying, no, don't bring this here. We're seeing the governor saying, no, don't bring this here. We're a safe haven. There are so many people in Chicago, in Illinois, that the state and local government do seek to protect. And again, I'm not speaking of anyone who's engaged in criminal activity and who is undocumented engaged in criminal activity. But there are millions of people that fall outside of that category, who are not engaged in criminal activity and who may not be documented, hundreds of thousands, but maybe they're legit. They may have a green card. They may have permanent residency. There are a lot of people who have a legitimate status who are also being gathered and transported. And by the time it's sorted out, because their phones are taken away and all of these things, then it sometimes could be too late. And then you got to get them back when they're transported to another country, or if they're transported to a facility that is horrific. So, Santita, that's really what I think a lot of civil rights activists lawyers who are protecting immigration lawyers are recommending to people that they do. But I'm just getting real basic, which is if you have a passport, use that passport.
If you have
Don't
one,
hesitate.
but so many people don't, and then, it's an additional, what, $40, $50 to get that little card, which I have too. I mean, I've got ID, but my mother even said to me, she said, you better make it very, very clear when you're walking down the street that you speak English. I couldn't believe she gave me that call. She said, no, 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 I don't want anyone mistaking you for anything else, because that could happen. And this is before the raid, right? I mean,
We
because
could all be mistaken. We could all
I
be
mean, I'm,
mistaken.
I'm just saying, for anybody, the way they're dropping this, the way they drop this net, that's everybody.
Right. Because we all look like we could be from another country. Actually, this is a country of immigrants. So this is one of the more ridiculous
That's what
things
they
that we're
say.
doing.
You know what? I want to bring up, for historical reference, and indeed, of course, Dr. David Gibbs, historian from the University of Arizona, and Jim Narakis of Fairness and Accuracy in Reporting, because you were giving us historical sweep, Attorney C.K. Hoffler. Of course, Attorney Hoffler is the past president of the largest and oldest Black Bar Association in the world. We were not allowed to join the American Bar Association. So anytime you see national in the professional title, that's the Black Association. And it's more than 65,000, 66,000 lawyers. She's on Court TV as a correspondent, excuse me, as an analyst. She's chair of Rainbow Push. And so I'm always asking, and she hosts her own show on WAOK every Tuesday, and she has a practice. So I don't understand how she does it all, but there we go. And she's a football mom for two Division I players, football players. That's right. That's right. But I want to go around here, because I have to tell you, Dr. Gibbs, this, and Jim Narakis, I spoke with you a little earlier. This has been like it's been an absolute shock, um, because this happened really in the heart of the Black community, in the middle of the night, and this is something that was absolutely unexpected.
I'm sorry,
Uh,
Santita, what are you referring to here?
the ICE raids here in
Yeah,
Chicago,
okay.
and I mean, in addition to everything else that we're dealing with the government shutdown, I mean, it's like, even if you want to get an ID, now you don't have enough personnel to process anything. I mean, some people are working, and other people are working under threat of being fired. I mean, we have a real crisis on our hands. Is there any historical precedent for what we are experiencing in the United States right now, Dr. Gibbs?
Offhand, I can't think of one. Not really like this in terms of using federal troops in American cities. I mean, there have been instances. It's well, 1957 Little Rock. Obviously, you had the 101st Airborne Division sent in under very different political circumstances and with very different objectives from what we're seeing now. Quite clearly, during the in Newark and Detroit, you had National Guard used with disastrous results, I might add. Lots of people were shot. There have been a few instances, but this is a very rare event we're seeing now. A specific parallel to this I can't think of. There's no doubt this is a highly authoritarian action being undertaken by President Trump. If there's any precedent, there's not very much precedent for it. It's a show of force by him, by somebody who clearly is not very secure of his political position. It's a highly divided country, and he wants to establish control through force. I think there's some good news here. I mean, the tendency is to compare, as many people have, Germany in 1933, that kind of thing. I think the good news is that I don't think Trump is terribly disciplined with regard to policy. When the Nazis came to power in Germany in 1933, when the Nationalist Party came to power in South Africa in 1948, these were people who had a very clear plan and a lot of discipline about implementing it. There's no doubt about that. I don't see anything like that in Trump's movement, not in terms of the discipline. I mean, in terms of the ruthless intent, perhaps that's possible. But I don't think there's the capability one saw with the
People are
Nazis.
trying to make up for the lack of discipline on the part of the leader by creating things like Project 2025. That was an attempt to create a blueprint for how an authoritarian takeover would work.
There's no doubt there's an infrastructure behind Trump. There's no doubt about that. Still, I'm seeing the appointment of top people are not very competent. I mean, the foreign policy, Rubio and Hegseth have been disasters. I mean, ideology aside, these are not very capable people, a lot of the people he's appointing here. There are some people highly intelligent. J.D. Vance, I think, is a very high IQ. I mean, whatever you think of him, he's not stupid. But a lot of these people really aren't very capable. And
He's clearly been selecting for loyalty above anything else, which obviously has its downsides in terms of competence.
It does.
And of course, this is Jim.
This
is Jim Narakis of Fairness and Accuracy in Reporting. And but just given how these offices are structured, is Pete Hegseth really in charge? I mean, I would imagine that he would have a whole system around him that would check him, like the president does too. But
absolutely, of course. I think that a scenario I could see, which I find disturbing, is you could see a situation where the increasing use of federal troops, and again, Trump's doing this again and again. He hasn't used the Marines again, but he did that, of course, in Los Angeles. If the National Guard prove unreliable, there's always a step up. And then the question would be, if you start getting crowds of people confronting federal troops, and there's pressure for them to start shooting people in the street, how would that go in terms of, would you start getting splits among the armed forces? That could be very dangerous, to say the least, in terms of political stability in this country. So there's an enormous amount of risk here beyond what we're seeing at the moment. But again, I do take some comfort in the fact that I just don't see Trump, and at least some of the top people around him, as competent. And so their ability really to pull off any kind of authoritarian system that many people are worried about, I would see is very limited. And Trump is impulsive as hell. He just changes his mind from moment to moment. He says whatever comes to his mind. I just don't see someone like that establishing a dictatorship. It just doesn't seem, I don't think he has it in him in terms of capability. On the other hand, he can do a lot of damage and is doing a lot of damage in terms of precedent. I mean, apart from what happens in the next 4 years, and a lot of very dangerous things can happen in the next 3.5 years, this sets a precedent. Other presidents, maybe people with greater capability, could use down the road. So none of this is good. But again, I don't think we should get too carried away in terms of Hitler establishing, I slipped there. Donald Trump establishing a Third Reich. I don't really see him. I see him doing that because I don't think he has the ability to do that.
Well, I mean, okay, I'm sorry, Attorney Hoffler.
I do have a little concern, a very strong concern, because of the U.S. Supreme Court and its rulings. And basically, the U.S. Supreme Court has given him just wide discretion to do whatever he wants to do, because he controls the U.S. Senate and the U.S. House of Representatives. His party controls it. And because there is such a thing as Project 2025, that is an incredibly oppressive document, I'm concerned that there is actually an orchestration. And even though he's impulsive, he's all of these things, I agree with you, David, but I do think, unlike his first term, this term, he has in place people who are very, very, very dangerous. And whether they're competent or not, there are a lot of people who were around Hitler who weren't very competent, but he does have the ability to execute because of the power that he's yielded. Because when you have all branches of government and there are no checks and balances, then you do have the ability, I believe, to move this country in a direction of authoritarian rule. And who's going to check him? I don't see where there's going to be any checking.
Yeah,
I don't see where there's going to be stopping.
Jim?
We should bear in mind that it is illegal to use the U.S. military for law enforcement purposes. There's a longstanding law that Trump has tossed out. It's not a law that he wants to follow, and so to his mind, it doesn't exist. And we're seeing some pushback by federal judges when these get to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court generally uses its emergency docket to strike them down without explanation. Just a kind of thumbs up from the right-wing majority on the court. we're seeing, U.S. citizens being taken away by masked police officers or federal agents. The Department of Homeland Security maintains that it is illegal to identify these people. It's illegal to videotape them, which you can't square this with the First Amendment, which makes it very clear that you have every right to report on government activities. But the First Amendment does not seem to be operative as far as the executive branch is concerned. The executive branch believes that it is in its power to threaten to take away licenses from TV networks because they don't like the way that they're talking about the president. The people are being deported from the country because they've written op-eds, because they've participated in protests. There's visions that people have of what a dictatorship looks like, and it might involve people goose stepping down the street or whatever. I feel like the pieces are falling into place right now, and the ability of the Trump administration to cause powerful institutions in our country that are supposed to be bulwarks of establishment power to fold, to crumble in the face of his illegal pressure is, I think, should be terrifying to every American.
But let me ask you this. So how do you think it's being reported? Because even as I've watched the reporting of these ICE raids, particularly in Chicago, given the profile of J.B. Pritzker, our governor, his not too thinly veiled desire to run for president, you've got a progressive mayor who's had clashes with this administration. And this was in the heart of the Black community. And we only see the brown people who were pulled out of their beds. No one even discusses, Jim, that there were Nigerians who were swept up too. I mean, they just got everybody. How is this being reported to your way of thinking?
I feel like it is being reported as a battle between politicians, between Pritzker and Trump, between Newsom and J.D. Vance, as if it is something that the public can be a spectator to, and you can decide which side you want to be on based on what team you're on. This is an emergency. This is a constitutional emergency where fundamental rights of the American people are being rolled back, being taken away. This should be the headline news daily, just as it would be if there was an invasion going on. When you have a government in power that is openly aspiring to be a tyranny, that it needs to be presented as an emergency. And I don't think that it is being reported as an emergency.
Dr. Gibbs, we're not seeing that at all. I don't see the sense of, I'm not saying that people should be frightened, but certainly they should be given context. And
I think people should be frightened. I do think people should be frightened.
Well, no, I don't. No, I think that. Well, I stand corrected. When I say I don't believe in fear mongering. But should they be alarmed, and should they be alerted? Yes. I'm just wondering if that's happening.
Were you asking me? I'm not sure.
No, yes, Dr. Gibbs. Well, anyone can jump in.
One of the things I guess I wanted to note is that what we're seeing now is a dramatic step up of authoritarianism, much more than we've seen, at least in many decades, for sure. There is some continuity here historically, and that one of the things that's always been a problem in the United States is that whatever is called national security has been considered an almost lawless and constitution-free area to a significant degree. I mean, if you look at the Constitution, it says treaties are the law of the land. And the U.S. always routinely violates treaties, beginning with the UN Charter, brazenly so, on a bipartisan basis. And the courts have mostly given great deference to the federal executive to do whatever it wants in areas of national security. Well, Trump calls this national security, does he not? This is a national security matter. We're using federalized National Guard. In the case of Los Angeles, we use the U.S. Marine Corps. So it's a national security crisis, as he defines it, because he said so. And so this is a continue. I mean, this is a step up. Don't get me wrong here. But it's not like this came out of nowhere, because we've established a lawlessness in anything involving national security, giving the president not quite unlimited power, but something pretty close to it. And so if that's the case, well, why not define anything you want national security, which is what Trump is doing. We've had mass surveillance for a very long time. Edward Snowden has shown that on a level that would make East Germany under the Stasi look like child's play. And nobody seemed very bothered by that. The courts went along with that. It was national security. Well, of course it's okay. So we're seeing here, it didn't come out of nowhere. And the legal context to the courts, showing deference to this, it didn't come out of nowhere either. And that's a bipartisan problem. Again, I do understand the alarmism about Trump per se, but I do see this as something for which the Democrats bear some responsibility as well, not just recently, but over many decades. This has been building for a long time. We've had this cancer of national security defined extremely broadly, and a cancer tends to grow. And if you have an empire, as the United States has had an empire since 1945, it shouldn't come as a surprise to you. It comes in conflict with democracy and rule of law. You can't really have both over the long term. And I think we're now seeing that come into full flower under Trump. That's why we see.
I certainly agree that this is the Constitution has been eroded over the past few decades. This is not something that is brand new. I think that Trump is taking advantage of the holes that have been poked in the Constitution by the people talk about the drug exception to the Bill of Rights, and certainly a terrorism exception to the Bill of Rights, particularly since September 11th. And it's not surprising that Trump is citing like the rationale for these ICE raids is the supposed Venezuelan drug menace. That in actual fact, very few drugs come to the United States from Venezuela. But it's become like the rallying cry of MAGA that we have to, the reason that those kids are being zip tied in the street is because of the Venezuelan drug gang that is supposedly operating, and that overrides all sense of legality and decency. And the executive memo that Trump recently put out that lays out a really terrifying vision of how to suppress dissent in this country by labeling it as direct support for terrorism. Because if you demonize, which is to say criticize, the Trump administration, then you are encouraging people to commit violence against them, and therefore you are culpable of supporting terrorism. And the terrorism laws are so broadly written that once you say terrorism, the government has all sorts of tools that they can use against you so if people who are saying that the ICE under Trump resembles the Gestapo, that is I'm committing an act in support of terrorism by saying that. And according to this memo, which I assume that Trump didn't write, but perhaps Stephen Miller is behind it, I could be prosecuted as an accessory to terrorist activity.
I mean, my question is, I don't see anyone digging deeper unless you're in independent media. I mean, it is no secret that the American oil companies and the European companies want the oil in Venezuela. That's what they want. There's no discussion about that. We keep hearing about the drugs that they're bringing in, or that we don't get the drugs from there. I see no pushback on that. I don't even see a CK. Let me give you this. They left children without their parents in the middle of the night on the street. How can that be justified, CK? I mean, how do you
It's
do
not
that?
justified. It's not justified in my impression, but that's where we are. That's why I said everyone should be frightened. We should be frightened. And not just if you are an undocumented person in the United States, not just if you're engaging in criminal activity, as I said, I can't help you. This discussion, what I'm saying is not really going to help someone who's engaging in criminal activity. But if you are simply undocumented, or if you are just, we have our expression in our community, driving while black, just you look like you could be someone like any of us. Every black person looks like they could be an immigrant, and we could be undocumented, and you are stopped, you are arrested and traumatized. I think that we should fear that, because that is what is happening to U.S. citizens. That is what is happening to U.S. citizens. And by the way, there are many, many, many cases of that we simply don't hear, that aren't reported. The only reason why we hear a lot about what's happening in Chicago is because of the fact that you have the conflict between the federal government and the state and the governor and the mayor of Chicago, and when we hear what's happening in Illinois. That's the only reason why there is public attention, and there needs to be public attention. And there are members of Congress who are seeking to bring this to the public's attention. But Santita, to separate the children, to rip the parents from the children, we see it in Atlanta all the time. There's some schools where a lot of undocumented persons, their children who are U.S. citizens, may go to a certain school in a certain community. And the ICE agents will show up very early in the morning, like really early in the morning, when they know that the parents are going to drop off the kids to arrest and to deport those parents. So it's happening everywhere. And these are not people who are necessarily, they're not part of the Venezuelan gangs. They're not part of any cartels. They're not part of any of that. They are working every single day. And by the way, contributing taxes. They are contributing, and some of them are serving in our military. They just do not have the appropriate immigration status. So it's very interesting how you can serve in our military, defend this country, and on the one hand, and then be arrested, undocumented, and deported on the other hand.
Dr. Gibbs, just where do you see the country going from here? I mean, because you talked about these points where we've seen the eroding of our rights.
Yeah.
Has there been any particular time in our modern history over the past 20, 30, 40 years that's been particularly egregious? Or have we just been slowly spiraling down into authoritarianism?
The situation is very dangerous right now in the sense that about roughly it's a 50-50 country. If you look at Trump's popularity ratings, I haven't checked in the last few days, but they've been pretty steady at around, I believe, 45%. Mm-hmm. I think eroded a couple of points since he was elected, but not that much. And by historical standards, he's not an unusually popular, but he's not unusually unpopular either. Mm-hmm. So basically, it's roughly half-half at this point in time. And given the tensions and given the willingness to use force as Trump is doing, danger of mass violence on a larger scale than we've seen so far is there. It's considerable. There are a lot of guns out there, as everyone knows, including automatic weapons. Those scare me especially. And so, some have compared this to the 1960s, when we had enormous divisions of civil rights over the war in Vietnam. We did, in fact, have clashes on campuses and cities. This goes way beyond that, in the sense that in the 60s, we did have one thing that was going well: the economy was growing. All right, employment was high, living standards were increasing in the late 60s. The 70s, not so much, but the late 60s, they're going up. That's not true anymore. The economy is stagnant. The prospect basically is probably for a recession in the next couple of years, which could be politically devastating if it comes, as I suspect it will. Trump's strange economic policies are likely to contribute to that. Unfortunately, I can think of one period where as divided as we are now, it would have to be the 1850s, which is an unfortunate precedent if you think about it.
Going into civil war.
Well, I don't think we'll have a civil war in that sense. I could see mass violence. I think that's a very realistic possibility, including things like Trump ordering troops to shoot people in the streets and then people shooting back because they have automatic weapons. I don't really see what exactly would stop that from happening, really. What kind of compunctions people would have. We've had, as you know, we've had some assassinations on both sides of the aisle. I mean, there were 2 assassination attempts against Trump, even by whatever else you may think of it, that indicates that there's potential for violence on both sides. Although, given the presence of guns, the fear I have is much greater from the right, just because they have a lot more guns.
Yeah.
And they know how to use them. At least some of them do. The people on the left who talk, I have friends who talk about we need to use violence, we need guns. It's just talk because they don't know how to use guns. They wouldn't know what to do with a gun if you gave it to them. But on the right, that's not the case. There are people out there who do know how to use guns. And that's a very frightening prospect. And so, thinking of, there was last year a very disturbing movie. I saw it last year called Civil War, about precisely the breakup of the country as it happened in 1861 or something like that. That's fanciful, or at least to me that seems, I don't see any scenario where that would happen, but we could see a lot more violence than we've seen so far. That does not seem fanciful to me.
Well, CK, I know you are running to dinner, and I have about 8 or 9 minutes left here, and I realize that everyone's on a time crunch. But Heather Hill, who's running for governor in Ohio, has this question for you. She said, "What do we as citizens who carry arms, what do we do? Second Amendment citizens, what do we do?" She said, because your first instinct is to grab your firearm. I mean, and I can only imagine what would have happened in that apartment building that night. I mean, think about that.
Well, I unfortunately do not have an answer for her. And the reason for that is because we're not operating in times where there is an observation of the Constitution, where there's an observation of the rule of law, where there is a lot of stuff that I'm seeing to me is just out illegal, but it's happening and there's no one to stop the illegality. So under normal circumstances, when you're armed, when you are legitimately armed, if you're defending your home, there's a lot there's a lot to be said when you're defending your home. If someone barges in your house and you're defending yourself, I mean, it's the rules of engagement are very different now. So I wish that I had and I were equipped to advise someone who was asking that question, but Santita, I'm just not equipped. And I also am not someone who believes in gloom and doom. I'm the exact opposite. I always believe that there's a silver lining in every cloud. I always believe that I see the glass half full. But in this instance, I think 3 things. 1, we should be concerned and fear what's happening. I mean, fear, not say, fear what's happening, because it could happen to any of us. Secondly, we need to, in our communities, however you define your community, begin to educate people around these issues. That's very important. And then 3, talk to our children, because I can see a scenario. I don't know if you've been to a gun range. I have fairly recently, over the past 6 months. If you go to a gun range if you've been to a gun range over the past 6 months, it is populated by young people.
Really?
Who are arming themselves. Yes, young people. So when we say, I don't know, because I'm not necessarily in this space, but David, I'm going to defer to you when you say, there's some people say they need to be armed, but they wouldn't know what to do with a gun. And then there are people on the right who really know what to do with a gun. I'm concerned about these young people who are arming themselves and feel that they need to be protected. They need to protect themselves. They feel and see something. I mean, Santita, I don't like to talk about my age because I say I'm 37, but there are decades and decades. When I was in law school, we were protesting. And so that's like almost 4 decades ago. These young people are arming themselves based on what they're seeing. And when our Secretary of State, our Secretary of Defense say things that they feel compromise them, they are preparing themselves. I don't know what they're preparing themselves for, but we should be frightened and very concerned. And I think part of the solution is turning to organizations and turning to our communities to help educate people, Santita. When I say educate, not books, but talk to people about these issues. I wish I had more answers for the young lady who did,
Well,
raise the issue. We do if we're armed, legitimately armed, and this happens to us.
but Attorney Hoffley, you are equipped. I just think we're living in extraordinary times. I
Well,
mean,
when I say equipped, I feel as though normally I would be able to say,
yeah.
this is what the Constitution says, this is what the laws, this is what the federal law is, and in different states have different laws that dictate X, Y, Z. Today, I feel that we are living in sheer chaos from the standpoint of observing the Constitution, the three branches of government, any checks and balances, and accountability. And I think that's where we are. And I'm not, it's not being critical of one party or the other. I do agree that the Democrats have something, I don't think that we can blame this all on just the Republicans. Rome wasn't built overnight. Whatever this is that we have, it was not built overnight. We just have a leader who's executing something that he said he was going to execute on. He said he was going to do it, and he's doing it. And people are just stunned that it's as broad as it is, because they thought it was going to be only limited to criminals who are undocumented and that are engaged in like heinous acts. They are probably, I don't know the statistics and the data, but I'd say the minority of people who are victims of the deportation.
But Barry Goldwater in 1964, I saw a video, and I've studied Barry Goldwater because quite frankly, I'm not partisan about the people I listen to. I want to hear what everybody's got to say, because a broken clock can be right twice a day, and sometimes I agree with people with whom I have some profound political or say worldview differences. And he warned of authoritarianism coming from the presidency in 1964. He said, we've got a problem and we need to watch it. So there's something that he saw. There's something that Eisenhower saw in the 50s, going into the 60s about militarism. There's something these people saw, and we don't want to listen. I mean, Jim, I have to tell you, no one really paid attention to Pete Hegseth's speech, the Secretary of War. And the president's speech that day, when he said, I think what we're going to do is deploy the troops, and we're going to experiment and figure out how to do war on America's streets. And
He was talking about American cities being the enemy within.
They left it to the pundits on TV to have a fun little debate, in the middle of the night. I said, do you hear what he said?
Could I just interject something, Santita?
Yes.
I think that is extremely disturbing, the idea of the enemy within. That's deeply authoritarian.
Yes.
I had to say, but it is somewhat bipartisan. One of the things that has very much alienated me from mainstream politics and frankly the Democratic Party was the Russiagate scandal, which seemed to me an absolute revival of McCarthyism from the Democrats.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of that was deeply McCarthyite. Anybody who studied the 1950s, all right, as I have, can see very close parallels to what the Democrats were saying about the threat within from Russia. All right, you're a Putin puppet and that kind of thing. That's exactly the same thing. The enemy within. You're a traitor. You're an agent of a foreign power. That kind of thing. If you said the wrong thing on the Ukraine war, well, you're a traitor, an enemy of a foreign power. So this is something that the Democrats do not have clean hands on. All right. Much of what Hegseth is saying has been anticipated by what the Democrats have been saying. So again, it takes two to tango. You do not get to this level of political toxicity and political dysfunction just because one party is doing it. It takes both parties to get there. And the Democrats have very definitely played their role in bringing us to this point. Even if I would agree what the Republicans are doing is a significant and dangerous step up. That's true. I agree with that. But again, the Democrats do not have clean hands here. That's my view.
And that doesn't discount the magnificent. There's some magnificent Democratic lawmakers in Congress, in the U.S. and House of Representatives, and the Senate. But I do agree with that. But there's still, thank God, some magnificent lawmakers who are fighting every single day and trying to to create balance and to right the ship and to have accountability and have there be legitimately 3 branches of government where there is accountability.
I mean, and they are
Right.
pushing, absolutely. That having been said, when I look at the news, I mean, Chaparral just said that the news is not, the media are not worth a dime, Jim Narekas. I mean, the most serious topics are relegated to entertainment, with pundits in the evening.
The corporate media have largely been neutralized under Trump by threats of FCC action against networks who for their political reporting, by these bogus lawsuits that Trump has had amazing success with in putting forward lawsuits based on completely absurd legal theories. But because the federal government has so much power, and Trump has made it absolutely clear that he is willing to use the power of the state against the corporate media outlets, they have caved in. They've been giving millions upon millions of dollars to Trump in hopes of buying him off. And now Larry Ellison, who is Trump's favorite billionaire, has bought CBS, is looking to buy CNN. They're really consolidating the information apparatus in this country, where if it hasn't been neutralized, it's going to be actually absorbed into the mega propaganda machine.
Yeah, but do you think Americans are going to take that? Because somewhere between Gaza and Charlie Kirk, I mean, you just keep on going. People are very mistrustful of the Ellison purchase of TikTok and CNN and I see this having a massive backlash, and I think Dr. Gibbs and Attorney C.K. Hoffler, Jim, let me start with you. I think this will be we're moving into ugly territory. I read the stories, but I read the comments that accompany the stories that many mainstream, corporate media outlets are beginning to shut down because it is now getting ugly out here. Really, the Ellisons do not. They're too far. They're too far up in the clouds to really understand what they're doing.
Yeah, I do. That to me, where I find hope is in seeing that the Trump regime does not understand how the progressive world works. They imagine that there's some kind of conspiracy that they can round up the ringleaders of and shut us all down, and that is not how politics really works in this country. It's certainly not how progressive politics works. I do think people need to be educating themselves. People need to find media outlets, like I'll say the Santita Jackson show, that call attention to the real crisis that we're going through. Find outlets that you feel you can trust. And while I wouldn't say that you should boycott corporate media, you need to take everything that they say with a strong grain of salt. They are selling a message to you that is they're really not on your side. They are on the side of making money, and they see that collaborating with the regime is better for their bottom line than fighting it, than resisting it.
Literally, I have a minute. I've got to go to. And I'm running late for my next hour, but I want to get closing thoughts from everybody. If you can give me under a minute, this has been so enlightening. And let me just say to you, Robert, that I am not we're not engaging in defeatism. What we're doing is giving you information. My father has always said, we have never lost a fight that we've waged, but you must fight. If you don't fight, you're guaranteed to lose. If you do fight, you just might, but if you don't, you're guaranteed to lose. And my brother Jonathan said, let's take fight out of this. Let's talk about nonviolent resistance.
Right.
So, but what you have to do is know where you are, Robert. We need to understand where we are. That's why I have one of the top media analysts in the world today, Jim Narekas here, so you can understand what's happening in the news. And I want you to go to fair.org, support them. Because when I want some analysis and some context, I want to know who Barry Weiss is, Barry Weiss is. I want to know who the Ellisons are. I want to know who owns the news and what their connections are. I find that out at fair.org. Support them as they support you. Dr. David Gibbs, if you want to understand why we are where we are, get his book, The Revolt of the Rich. Because after we won all of these rights, not only did we win racial rights, but we won economic rights. And there has been a revolt. You need to understand that. Get his book. If you really want to be up to date on the legal side, reach out to C.K. Hoffler on her show every Tuesday on WAOK. It's an iconic radio station. She's independent. She's on Court TV. Call Court TV and let them know that you want to see more of her. She needs her own show. Yeah. Someone is going to give you that kind of analysis. No, look, I tell you, you have not because you've asked not. They give a lot of people who are far less qualified than you shows. Now, I mean, and I'm tired of I don't watch shows where I don't see what I don't where I don't get a full perspective. That's what I'm looking for, and I'm grown enough to ask for it because I know at least I deserve it. So I've taken up a lot of your time. So let me give everybody 30 seconds, and I mean that because I got to go to the next hour because the clock is on me. Jim Narekas.
Well, I want to echo what you said about. I think people do need to fight, and fighting is not. I don't think the guns are going to get us out of this. I think that organized resistance, joining together with your neighbors to fight what the Trump regime is doing, is what's going to get us through this.
Gandhi showed us, Dr. King showed us, nonviolent resistance is the way to go. We can do that. Attorney C.K. Hoffler.
Agreed. Nonviolence resistance is the way. Also, you just have to realize that simply by raising these issues, raising these questions, and wanting to educate yourself more, it does not mean that you are someone who is subjecting yourself to being imprisoned and being tortured and it does not mean that. There's a way to exercise your rights in a non-violent way. Non-violence is the key. And don't engage in criminal activity when you are engaging in nonviolent activity. The two of them are mutually exclusive. If you're going to go down that route, then that's a completely different discussion. That's what we're talking about. That's not what we're talking about.
Mm-hmm. And we would not be in this new America if we'd fought that revolution violently. It was nonviolent resistance that gave us a new America and a new set of founding fathers, in addition to. Dr. David Gibbs, you can close us out.
All right, I do recall an incident in 1972 where George Wallace, really vile person, really a vile politician with a vile record. Nevertheless, it was an assassination attempt against him, and he was visited in the hospital by Shirley Chisholm, who also detested his politics, but nevertheless, she wanted to make a statement against the use of political violence, and that is a laudable idea in my view. And we should think about that. There's no way that violence is going to be an effective response to what Trump is doing. It'll only make it worse. I do see one other factor that is to be taken into account. I do think a recession is a real possibility in the next couple of years, or some kind of economic problem, possibly a major crisis. That is the one thing that would definitely sink Trump's popularity with his base, even more than Epstein, more than the assassination of Kirk, more than Gaza, really. It would be a downturn in the economy. And I hate to look forward to a downturn because a lot of people will suffer for it. There's no doubt about that. But given the circumstances, I could see that as politically advantageous. And we who oppose Trump should start thinking of creative ways, not involving violence, to respond to that type of situation and to take advantage of it politically.
Amen. March, sit in, get registered to vote. Get registered to vote. Get registered to vote. We've had two incredible elections, or should I say, not elections, but we had the primary in New York. We had the Democratic Farmer Labor Party, who gave us two young men who have a new politics, a politics that we've been pushing for. Omar Fateh from Minneapolis said, I was inspired by Bernie Sanders. Bernie Sanders came out of the Jackson campaign, who came out of Dr. King. We are winning every day. You just have to keep fighting, everybody. Let's continue with this discussion with some people from Chicago who are going to talk about how this has impacted us here and how because they are moving to your own city and then to rural areas. This is not going to stop everybody. But if you continue to push back nonviolently, we can win. We can do that. Blessings to you, everybody. The Santita Jackson Show, AM 950 Radio, the voice of progressive Minnesota. Attorney C.K. Hoffler on WAOK. All right, Bernadette, WAOK every Tuesday at 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. How can we get your podcast, Jim Narakis?
It's you can download it at fair.org, fair.org.
All right, and I'm going to connect you all so you can be on her show and she can be on yours. And you know how I do this with everybody. AM 950 Radio, the voice of progressive Minnesota.